go into the larger picture, so since the rise of industrialization, the Earth has been trying to keep up with human impacts that have changed the Earth's natural state. There's been personal level impacts. We're currently facing a point of no return with biodiversity loss and extinction. We see a lot of this in New Brunswick. We've even industrialized our food to the point that we no longer have a connection to it when we're shopping at the supermarkets. We really don't know where our stuff is coming from. So large corporations and governments are highly controlling these conditions, and climate change can relate back. You can see the connection to all of these. So we're facing a critical point on Earth where it will make an extreme turn, and whether or not our Earth will remain sustainable is for us to decide. So, climate change. So climate change is a word that everyone hears, and everyone has a partial understanding of the significance and implications over time due to global warming and climate change. It's important to understand that climate is not the weather. Climate change is the changing patterns over time, resulting in the rise of average surface temperatures on Earth. There are natural changes that happen over time, although human activity enhances these changes. So this is related to the greenhouse effect, and I'll get to that in the next slide. So records show that 2016 was the warmest year on record, and so obviously data is always a year behind, so we can't really say where 2017 is yet. So if extreme changes are not made, it's scientifically proven that the Earth will reach catastrophic temperature levels this century. So this is the greenhouse effect. So whenever the sun's rays hit the Earth, it naturally reflects, so it heats the Earth some, and then the heat bounces back, and it just, but whenever you have greenhouse gases, CO2 gases, other gases, they become trapped in the atmosphere. They have nowhere to go. So what's happening is it's creating warmer temperatures here on Earth. So this is the global temperature and carbon dioxide graph. I thought it was really interesting. You can see, obviously, a very huge jump from the 1950s onward, also with the CO2 concentration as well as the temperature. So I'm sure most of you are aware, like after World War II, there was a lot of industry, a lot of people were getting a lot of jobs, so there was a lot of factories and stuff, so you can see that pattern, and over time it's continuing to rise greater and greater every year. So this is from Natural Resources Canada, and this is dated to 2017, so they wrote, this is when they published it. So Natural Resources Canada expect a shift in wildland fire patterns. The prediction is that during this century, climate change will result in more frequent fires with environmental and economic consequences. Fire-prone conditions are predicted to increase across Canada, and as much as double of the amount of forests will be burned by the end of this century. Along with drier and hotter conditions, other climate change impacts that will play a role in forest fires include insect outbreaks. So whenever the insects are going into the woods, it's creating a different condition. It makes the wood obviously more susceptible to being burnt. Ice storms and high winds. So it's vital for our department to understand that fire agency suppression efforts, they will increasingly be strained all over Canada. So here's a video for you guys to watch, and if it comes. So this video isn't actually Canadian, it's from the United States, but it was the one that actually best described climate change, and you can hear a couple of fire chiefs that are talking, so I thought it was a good one.
It's on the
Climate change fosters conditions that increase wildfire risk. Higher temperatures can increase the frequency and severity of drought, which can turn previously healthy forests and grassland into kindling. Climate change has advanced the onset of spring snowmelt, which extends the dry season and hence the fire season. Higher temperatures mean faster evaporation and more flammable fuels in fields and woods in general. Climate
Climate change has really been a huge impact in California. Typically in California, in my jurisdiction, the typical brush season is from May to November, but now it's been year-round. Because of the drought, the fires are more dynamic, they're more volatile, and it has an increased exposure to firefighter safety and potential loss of life and property in our jurisdiction.
Like in many other places, unfortunately Texas, almost the whole state of Texas was in extreme drought for a number of years, and then we had the wettest spring in history in April, and then we went the whole summer without any rain. It's a huge area for wildfires, then it's floods. Then we have wildfires, then we have floods. Every homeowner, every person that lives in a wildland urban interface has to do their part, and they have to help us keep them safe.
I think the more that we can do to raise awareness in the public of the fact that the wildland fire problem is changing will help us in our job making our communities safer. Most people go through their lives every day, and just the wildfire issue, the hazards that go with climate change are background noise. We can only do so much in the fire service to protect our communities, and the public needs to be engaged on the issue and take an active role.
Impacts of the changing climate contribute to more frequent large fires and a longer fire season in the United States. This is yet another reason why it's absolutely critical to act on climate today.
Okay, so I made a list of some recent major events, and I tried to pick some that we are very familiar with. So here in New Brunswick, the ice storm of 2017 near Caracat, Hurricane Arthur, the winter storm of 2013. It was leaving hundreds of thousands of people without power in New Brunswick, and just recently the base Gagetown fire, which was like the end of October, which is very rare. It created an air quality advisory. And in Canada, we have the Fort McMurray fire of 2016 and this year's BC wildfires. So I'm sure you guys are familiar with seeing this when you're looking for fire vans and stuff. So this is the provincial summary. So it gives a 10-year average, 2016-2017. And as you can tell, the 2017 for total hectares that are burned is either close to double or over double the 10-year average and 2016. And whenever you look at it, you can see there's less fires, but there's more area being burnt. So the fires are growing stronger. So, the near future. So these conditions will become the new normal. We need to be prepared. So local first responders capabilities will be exceeded. DNR, Natural Resources Canada, emergency measures organizations, and first responders in many areas are already talking about this, and it will impact the future of emergency management. I have one more video for you guys, but it's good.
In Portugal, unprecedented forest fires last month raged for days, killing more than 60 people. In California, over 8,000 people were forced from their homes in recent weeks.
It was coming down. It was wild. We had to get out.
See how hot that is?
And now in BC, green mountainside charred.
Police came back and they said, aren't you guys going? You gotta go now.
Devastation and displacement.
It took our village away.
What we seem to be seeing is
even more severe fire seasons more frequently, and perhaps more severe or more intense than we see in the past.
Wildfire scientist Mike Flanagan says the severity of fire seasons globally can be linked to climate change. But to grasp that link, he says we first need to understand how these fires start. It takes 3 ingredients.
The first ingredient is the fuel, the stuff that burns, the trees, the shrubs, the grass. Second, you need an ignition agent, and people and lightning are the 2 common ignition agents. Third is hot, dry, windy weather.
Generally, we talk about 30-30-30 rule when we talk about explosive fire conditions, and that means temperatures above 30 degrees, humidity less than 30%, and winds greater than 30 kilometers per hour.
Johanna Wagstaff joins us one more time.
CBC meteorologist Johanna Wagstaff has been following wildfire seasons in Canada for years.
Fires are definitely getting more intense, and they're becoming more frequent and just larger in size.
Tonight, residents are being told to prepare for the worst. Hundreds of fires burned through the Northwest Territories in 2014.
This is about the people of Saskatchewan, and that's why we're here.
In 2015, wildfires got so bad in Saskatchewan, the Army was called in. And in Alberta.
So we lost everything now.
The 2016 Fort McMurray fires were the most destructive in Canadian history.
The people here are devastated. Everyone's devastated. The community is going to be devastated.
Wagstaff says all of these cases, including BC, can be connected to a warming climate.
Most of the major fire events we've seen, Northwest Territories, Saskatchewan, Fort McMurray, even in places like Portugal, it's often preceded by a big heat wave, and normally the jet stream sort of helps carry weather patterns along so they don't stay in place for more than a couple of days. But a warming climate is actually leading to these jet streams getting locked in place for days or weeks on end, and that's often the case for big fire situations, hot and dry for weeks on end.
Another factor fueling recent wildfire seasons may be winters that are wetter than usual, something that might sound counterintuitive, but that can lead to a lot of growth of fuels to burn. So this year we saw a lot of tall grass growing, and that has now all dried out in the past 2 heat waves, and that's all extra fuel to burn. And these sort of shifts and extremes when it comes to weather patterns will become more frequent with climate change.
With climate change, we expect longer fire seasons.
Mike Flanagan says climate change helps explain why Alberta had to start its fire season early in March instead of April. And as the climate warms,
we're seeing more lightning activity, and the more lightning activity, the more fires you get. And most of our climate models for the future suggest we'll get warming, but not much increase in precipitation. So the fuels will be drier, so it's easier for fires to start and spread.
So what can Canadians expect going forward?
We have to keep in mind is that fire is a natural part of our Canadian forests. People live, work, play in the forest, and you get this intersection between fire and people with disastrous results at times.
We are going to see longer fire seasons, larger fires, more intense fires, but in all of the modeling, when we look at climate change in the future, there are different scenarios. So even though our next sort of 3 decades are locked in based on the emissions that we've already put into the atmosphere, beyond 2050 we can make a lot of changes, and I think in combination with how we manage fires, that can have a big impact on how bad our seasons are in the future.
So, the green. I'm sure you guys all see lots of this. I know I see them whenever the kids come home with the reduce, reuse, recycle, and it becomes hopefully ingrained in everyone's head. But the important thing to know is that these things are really important, and they are important at an individual level. But what's really important to understand is that, you know, sometimes people obviously tend to put the pressure on the individual instead of the whole. So what, you know, really needs to be done is the governments, they need to step up, they need to be aggressive, provincially and federally. So the government in New Brunswick is actually bringing out a climate action plan, which is a step in the right direction. So hopefully it'll get more people talking, more people doing. But the most immediate thing that needs to happen is obviously to decarbonize. So there's definitely some people